It was just after sunset when the rain began to fall, turning the cracked sidewalks of the city into glistening mirrors of broken neon. The night was cold, the kind of cold that made people hurry home, clutching their coats tight and pretending not to see the shadows that lingered under bridges. But for one man, there was no home to hurry to. He sat under a flickering streetlight beside an old convenience store, his clothes soaked through, clutching a paper cup that once held coffee but now only caught the rain. His beard was tangled, his face lined with years of sorrow, and his hands trembled as if holding on to life itself. His name was Thomas, though no one had called him that in years. Across the street, the roar of a Harley shattered the silence. A tall man in a black leather jacket, his vest patched with the emblem of the Iron Saints Motorcycle Club, pulled up near the curb. His name was Jack Rivers, a man whose reputation preceded him, a rough biker, known for bar fights, bad language, and a past that the police knew too well. He had seen the city's darkness before, but what he was about to witness that night would change the course of his life forever. Backhand index pointing right if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of standing up for what's right. Please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this one reach hearts that need hope. Jack leaned on his bike, lighting a cigarette, his sharp eyes catching the scene unfolding ahead. A police cruiser had pulled up beside the homeless man. Two officers stepped out, one older with tired eyes, and the other younger, restless, with a badge that seemed to shine brighter than his sense of compassion. The older cop stood back as the younger one began shouting at Thomas. From where Jack sat, he couldn't hear every word, but the tone said enough: disgust, anger, and arrogance. The officer accused Thomas of loitering, of making the sidewalk look bad. Thomas tried to stand, his frail body shaking as he muttered something Jack couldn't catch. And then, in a flash that sliced through the rain, the cop slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed like thunder in the quiet night. Thomas stumbled, hitting the pavement, his paper cup spilling what little dignity he had left. Jack's cigarette fell from his lips. Something deep inside him, something he thought he'd buried years ago, ignited like fire. He'd been on the wrong side of the law more times than he could count, but he'd never stood by and watched injustice unfold like this. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened, and before he even realized what he was doing, he kicked his Harley into gear and roared across the street, the engine's growl cutting through the downpour. Stopped right beside them. The young cop turned, startled, his hand instinctively going to his holster, but Jack didn't flinch. His eyes burned with fury, but there was control in his voice when he spoke. He demanded to know why the cop had hit a defenseless man. The officer barked back, telling Jack to mind his business. But this was his business now. Years ago, Jack had been that man, lost, broken, ignored. Before the motorcycle club, before the tattoos and the scars, he had been homeless too. Jack stepped between Thomas and the officer, his towering frame blocking the rain like a shield. "You hit him again," he said, "and you'll regret it for the rest of your life." The older cop tried to calm things down, but the younger one was too far gone in his pride. He shoved Jack back and yelled for him to leave or face arrest. Jack didn't move. Instead, he took off his leather jacket and placed it over Thomas's shoulders. The gesture silenced everyone for a moment. Thomas looked up, tears mixing with the rain, as if he couldn't believe a stranger, a biker, of all people, would show him kindness. Then things escalated. The younger officer radioed for backup, claiming a hostile suspect was interfering with police work. Within minutes, more cruisers arrived. Flashing lights painted the wet streets red and blue, and a small crowd began to gather. Most of them filmed with their phones, whispering, but none dared step forward. Jack stood firm. He told them he wasn't leaving until someone explained why an officer thought it was okay to assault a man who could barely stand. When the backup arrived, the situation turned chaotic. The police surrounded Jack, ordering him to the ground. He didn't resist, but he didn't submit either. The older cop, who had stayed quiet until now, finally stepped in. He asked the younger one what had really happened, but the rookie spun his story fast, claiming the homeless man had attacked first, and Jack had threatened an officer. Jack knew where this was heading. He'd seen it before. The law protecting its own, the truth buried under badges. But this time he wasn't backing down. He turned to the crowd and said loudly enough for their cameras to catch, "You all saw what he did. You know what's right. Don't let them twist this." The crowd murmured. Some nodded. One woman shouted, "We saw everything." That small spark of courage spread like wildfire. More voices joined in, confirming what had really happened, that Thomas had done nothing, that the cop had struck first, that Jack was only helping. Under the pressure of the growing attention, the police hesitated. The older officer looked torn between duty and conscience. Finally, he ordered everyone to calm down and asked that Thomas be taken to the hospital instead of jail. Jack was still taken into custody that night, but he didn't fight it. As they led him away, he looked at Thomas, still trembling under his jacket, and nodded. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. Inside the station, the air was thick with tension. The young officer strutted around, trying to justify himself, but the story was already spreading outside. Videos uploaded, hashtags forming, people demanding accountability. The captain of the precinct called Jack in for questioning, but instead of anger there was curiosity in his eyes. He'd seen the footage. He knew the truth. Jack told his side calmly, explaining how he couldn't stand by while someone abused their authority. The captain sighed deeply, saying, "You could have walked away, you know." Jack replied quietly, "I walked away from too many things before, not this time." Hours later, the captain released him with a warning. The officer who slapped Thomas was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was something. When Jack stepped out of the station, dawn was breaking. The rain had stopped and the streets glowed under the first light of morning. Across the street, sitting on a bench with a fresh blanket and a sandwich in his hands, was Thomas. He looked up, his eyes full of gratitude. Over the next few days, the story went viral. People hailed Jack as a hero, the biker who stood up to corruption and protected the forgotten. News crews wanted interviews, but Jack refused. "I'm no hero," he said. "I just did what anyone with a heart should have done." But behind the tough words, he couldn't deny that something inside him had shifted. For years, he'd lived with guilt, for fights, for mistakes, for people he'd hurt in his reckless youth. That night, he'd found a piece of redemption he didn't even know he was searching for. As for Thomas, things began to change too. The attention brought local shelters and aid groups to his side. A charity offered him housing and medical care. He was finally getting help after years of being invisible. When he was asked on camera how it felt to be rescued by a biker, Thomas smiled weakly and said, "He didn't see a homeless man. He saw a human being." Weeks passed and Jack went back to his life, fixing bikes, riding with his crew, keeping mostly to himself. But one afternoon, as he was closing up his garage, a man walked in. It was Thomas, clean-shaven in new clothes, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Jack and said, "I figured I owed you a drink." The 2 men sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee, letting the hum of the city fill the space between them. Finally, Thomas said, "You saved me that night." Jack shook his head. "No, man," he said softly, "you saved me." That night Jack rode out again, the city lights flashing beneath him. He passed the same street corner where it had all begun. The flickering streetlight was still there, but Thomas was not. Instead, there was a small mural, a painted scene of a biker shielding a homeless man from the rain, with a simple line underneath: "Be the reason someone believes in kindness again." Jack stopped his bike and stared at it for a long time, his heart heavy yet full. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. He realized that sometimes redemption doesn't come from fixing the past, but from doing one good thing that echoes forward, a single act of courage that tells the world there's still hope. He revved his engine and looked toward the horizon, where the sunrise painted the sky gold. Somewhere out there, someone else was probably hurting, forgotten, waiting for a moment of kindness. And Jack Rivers knew he'd be there when they needed him, not as a savior, not as a hero, but as a man who remembered what it meant to care. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below to remind the world that kindness and courage still matter. Every act of goodness can change a life. Speech balloon before you go, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Jack's place? Your words might inspire someone else to stand up for what's right today. As the Harley roared into the distance, fading into the morning light, the world seemed a little less cold, because one man chose to see humanity where others saw nothing. And that perhaps was enough to change everything.